Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever felt like your workplace or school is just slapping band-aids on the exact same recurring issues year after year, yeah, we've all been there. Today, we're diving into some incredible insights from Dr. Shungu M'gadzah's 6 stages framework. We're going to look at this trap organizations fall into, fixing the visible stuff while completely ignoring the deeper conditions. If you're tired of those temporary, superficial fixes, buckle up because this is a real game changer.
Okay, I want you to literally picture yourself standing in a dark cave. Ask yourself, are the organizational problems you deal with every single day actually real, or are they just surface-level illusions? Think about it. When a problem pops up, maybe it's school attendance, a toxic workplace culture, some team conflict, what are we actually looking at? Are we just instantly reacting to the frustrating, in-your-face symptoms with quick judgment? Or are we actually pausing, getting curious, and doing the hard work of examining the systemic conditions that create them? That right there, that shift from judgment to curiosity, that's everything. So our starting point is this shadowy place called the cave of symptoms. It's such a brilliant metaphor from the framework. It perfectly describes those environments where we just grab onto quick explanations and react to behaviors, rather than looking at the environment itself. In the cave, we see an outcome and we instantly want a simple solution. We see underachievement and we just demand better results, completely ignoring the context, like, say, a lack of opportunity or access. The cave basically tricks us into thinking the visible outcome is the whole story, and it almost never is.
And you can see this stark contrast everywhere. Leaders almost always spot the loud issues, right? Poor attendance, behavioral incidents, high staff turnover, all those complaints. Those things flash red like giant warning lights. They demand a reaction. But what about the quiet crises? What about the lack of psychological safety, the total absence of trust and belonging? Embedded biases, unmet needs, we completely miss them. And honestly, when we only manage those visible, loud issues, we are fighting a losing battle. Let's ground this in reality for a second. Picture a kid hesitating at the school gate. The school looks at the data, notices attendance is down. Now, the classic cave of symptoms reaction is to instantly say, right, we need stricter attendance policies. But a systems thinking approach, that stops and asks, wait, why are our pupils disengaging? And the answer could be anxiety, family stress, or just a fundamental feeling that they don't belong there. Harsher rules aren't going to fix a child's anxiety. The symptom might be attendance, but the actual condition, that's disconnection. Imagine that empty chair in a classroom, or that totally unheard staff members sitting in a boardroom. When organizations absolutely refuse to leave this cave, they start over-relying on sanctions, they blame individuals, and surprise, surprise, they experience the exact same problems on repeat. They just keep churning out policy after policy, launching these superficial, shiny new initiatives. And the tragic part? Without getting to the root causes, the exact same issues return year after year. It's the very real human cost of a system that defaults to blaming people instead of actually helping them. So the big question, how do we actually get out? Well, the escape route starts by shifting our mindset. We have to move from immediate judgment to genuine empathy. And it begins by simply asking this really powerful, curiosity-driven question. What conditions might be shaping this outcome? That's it. Just pausing before issuing a sanction or drafting yet another policy, and instead getting deeply, genuinely curious about the environment we've actually built. Thankfully, we're not flying blind here. We have a map to walk out of the shadows. Dr. Shungu M'gadzah's 6 stages framework, or SSF, gives us this incredibly brilliant, psychologically informed path. It essentially lays out how both individuals and organizations can transition. You move from just being vaguely aware of an issue to deeply understanding it on a relational level, and ultimately to changing the entire system so those underlying conditions are fixed for good. Let's break down how this actually builds. It starts internally. At stages 1 and 2, emerging awareness and discomfort, you're just asking, what am I not seeing? You're challenging your own personal biases. Then it shifts outward. Stages 3 and 4 are all about actively listening to and learning from the lived experiences of others, and then applying those lessons to your everyday actions. Finally, you reach the summit, stages 5 and 6. This is where you evolved into a systems thinker and a transformational leader. You're no longer just trying to fix me, you are actively redesigning the whole system for we. And as we start looking at things through this system-wide lens, we hit a major crossroad. The massive difference between mere compliance and true belonging. Look, compliance basically just asks, hey, are people following the rules? It leans on tick box exercises and rigid policies. True belonging, on the other hand, asks,
Do people actually feel seen and valued here? It thrives on trust, voice, and authenticity. In a highly compliant system, people often still feel totally unheard and isolated. But in a culture of belonging, that's where people feel safe enough to actually speak up and innovate. Because here's the hard truth. Having a wall plastered with inclusion awards means absolutely nothing, literally nothing, if a person's actual lived experience tells them otherwise. We see it all the time. Organizations pour millions of dollars into diversity training checklists and equality charters, and yet someone inside that exact same system is thinking, people like me don't really belong here. We have to realize that compliance isn't the finish line. Honestly, it's just the bare minimum standard. Which brings us to a question that really forces us to move past the paperwork and empathize with the actual on-the-ground realities of our people. If I spent a day in your organization, what would I see, hear, and feel? Think about it. If we walk the halls of your school or sit in on your company's meetings, what's the actual vibe? What's the lived experience? Do people feel safe to challenge a bad practice? Can they admit a mistake without being terrified of getting slammed with a sanction? That right there, that is the true test of your culture. The problem is, so many organizations just stop at compliance because, well, it's easy to measure, right? You can check a box. But true transformational cultures, they treat compliance as literally just step one. They keep pushing. They build participation, which then earns trust, which then creates the actual space for real belonging. And that belonging, that naturally leads to advocacy. And eventually, you get total cultural transformation. But make no mistake, it takes relentless, intentional commitment to walk that entire path. So if we want to finally stop trying to fix people and start fixing the conditions, leaders have to build the capacity to hold difficult truths. Actually, it's more about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. It means abandoning that tribal, defensive thinking when things get tough and resisting the urge to just retreat into the safety of absolute certainty. We have to stay relentlessly curious about those underlying causes. We have to constantly examine our systemic assumptions. And above all else, we absolutely must foster real psychological safety, where people feel in their bones that they belong. At the end of the day, we have a choice. We can spend all our energy desperately trying to modify behaviors, handing out sanctions, and strictly enforcing compliance, or we can do the hard, real work of transformational leadership, redesigning the very conditions that caused those behaviors in the first place. Because ultimately, understanding conditions, that is exactly where real change begins. I'm going to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought to take back to your own teams and schools as we wrap up this explainer. Forget your policy documents for a minute. Just put them aside. Look at the lived experiences of your people. What actual, concrete evidence of psychological safety, trust, and connection can you point to today? What proves they truly belong? It's a tough question, but it's the one we need to answer. Here's to building true belonging in all of our spaces. Thanks for joining me.